Okay, I think we are ready to start, and I'm glad to see all these people came back. That's awesome. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. Thank you for joining us for this interactive session with members of the Chapter Advancement Team on volunteer and member engagement. Let's take a moment to thank our 2020 LTC sponsors. Care Credit, Care Payment, Craneware, Parallon, Patent, Real Cost EPSI, Premier, Red Spring, Russell Investments, Cenex, and Virginia Mason Institute. Thank you so much. Before we begin, we love the conversation that's been happening all morning in the chat. It's great to see so many people engaged on our first ever virtual LTC. Just a reminder, if you have a question for the panelists, if you could please utilize the Q&A pod to ask those questions. We'd love to hear what you've got to ask so we can get some more engagement throughout the webinar. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Dayton Benway, 2019-20 CAT Chair, Pete Sable, 2020-21 CAT Chair, and Andrew Hatemonic, 2020-21 CAT Co-Chair, who will share their volunteer and member engagement experiences and best practices they've learned along the way.
All right, thank you for coming together today, guys. I know we're coming together in a different atmosphere today. Dayton is here from Maine, Andrew from Oklahoma, and Pete from Nevada. I am here from Missouri, and we are going to have a discussion in regards to volunteer and member engagement. So first off, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great, Tracy. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous.
Rocking and rolling.
I am in the middle of a spring storm, so it is howling outside right now.
You look like you're in the middle of a stream.
This is the ocean.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It's the Atlantic Ocean. It's a big pond.
Awesome. So we're going to be asking some volunteer member engagement. Each of you have been involved with HFMA for a while. So how long have you been involved, Dayton?
I started as attending sessions back in 2000, and it took me a few years to become an active volunteer, but that was my first experience was back in 2000.
Awesome. How about you, Pete?
I started back in 1997, so this being a financial organization, hopefully I could do my math right, and it's about 23 years.
And Andrew, how about you, kid?
I started, and that's right, kid is the right word for this particular group of individuals. I started in about 2009. I'm pretty active for about 8 or 9 of those, 9 or 10 of those years. So.
Awesome. So tell us how you went from being an HFMA member to a volunteer member. We'll go ahead and start with Andrew.
Well, I think it was a pretty natural transition for me, myself. My firm, BKD, is pretty actively involved in the chapters where it is physically located, and so it was kind of a natural progression for me to get involved, start going to meetings, getting to know people, and then one day it was kind of just like, hey, we need help with something, and all of a sudden I'm on a committee, and then a year later I'm responsible for assisting with the certification, and then I'm the certification chair, and it just all went downhill from there.
So I started, I'm the classic voluntold example of how I began my active volunteering. And it started out by running an education session and then running more education sessions, and eventually sitting on the board of the main chapter, and then it progressed all the way up through the president track into a regional executive, and now is a CAT.
Yeah, and for me, it was very similar kind of to Dayton. When I had moved to Las Vegas in the mid-90s, my boss was on the board. The networking events were the place to be, especially being new to the market coming from New York. And I was voluntold. I think I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, I was chapter president. So
a few times, right, Pete? A few times, yeah. You know, sometimes that's how it all works for most of us. So, Andrew, can you tell us how being in chapter leadership has enhanced some of your skill sets, either for professional and or personal?
So I think that's a really good question. And one of the things that I like to tell people is we talk about what skills you develop being a chapter leader, is that in many cases, this is, as a trade organization, an opportunity for people to step into new roles they've never had before. It's a stretching kind of an environment sometimes. And so it gives you really the opportunity to do things you've never been tasked with. And so for me, running meetings, often running a group of individuals, by the way, who are all volunteers. So we're all trying to pull towards the same goal, but we're not being paid for this particular responsibility or skill set. And so really trying to motivate and get people to move in the same direction was something that was quite challenging at times, and yet it's been pretty rewarding to be able to say I've added certain skills to that tool belt that I carry.
Nice. And Pete, I know you've had an opportunity to serve in different roles at the association level and at the local level. What skill sets would you say that being a volunteer has enhanced for you?
Yeah, I'd say off of what Andrew had just talked about, for me, aside from all of the things that I've done within my career, having the ability to lead volunteers is a specific skill set. It's easy for me to tell my staff that I pay what to do and I can write them up. When you're dealing with a series of peers, folks that you work for and worked alongside, that is, I think, probably one of the best skills that I've come out of HFMA with, aside from knowing how to, I call it speed networking, whether it's annual conference or LTC or a regional symposium. You see people from all different parts of your career come in, and it's great to not only check in with them and see how they've sort of advanced within their career, but look at how their skill sets have sort of evolved as well. But I would say biggest skill, learning how to lead in a volunteer organization where that is not the primary function of the individuals, on your board.
Right. And Dayton, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think all I'd add is along the lines of what Pete was saying, leading within a volunteer organization, but also leading groups of individuals who come from varying backgrounds, and they arrive at an answer than what you see in your own organization. They also come from perspectives that often don't line up during either a board meeting or any type of group exercise, and leading those individuals through that kind of conflict management and how to get to the best answer when they're not seeing eye to eye can provide really valuable as you move your career ahead.
So I'm going to kind of play on that a little bit. What about dealing with everybody that has type A personality sitting in the same room in a volunteer leadership capacity? Has that been a good skill set that has helped within your career?
Well, I think it's helped me gray prematurely, I think. But beyond that, I'd say my day job is the managing partner of Baker Newman Noyes. It's an accounting firm in the Northeast. And so I was able to hone that skill at HFMA before I needed it in my day job. And so I would say it is for me, one of the biggest things that I took away from HFMA was dealing with, again, those people who are very convinced that they're coming at something from the right angle, and taking the time to understand that without just discounting it because it doesn't match the rest of the group. And I think it's been a really important skill for me.
Yeah, and I jump in this one too, Tracy, because as I move up in the organization that I work for, I've seen, much like sort of Dayton was talking about, I call it herding cats, right? So as you're dealing with a bunch of leaders, of type A's, everybody wants to be a decision maker. There's a lot of folks that want to tell folks what to do, but not a lot of folks that want to do the work. So I've always learned the skill of trying to keep the conversation more focused on not open-ended, but very specific type of, hey, we've got a decision between A and B, I lean towards B, but also let folks know that it's okay to disagree. You know, not everything needs to be a consensus. And I think a lot of times what I've seen is the configurations and the different teams that I've been part of, you'll have sort of that alpha person up front, and folks feel a little bit intimidated and don't necessarily feel like, oh my gosh, I don't want to say anything about X or Y, but it's okay to have an opinion that sort of differs, because as Dayton said earlier, we all have very eclectic and different backgrounds, and that's one of the benefits of HFMA being a national organization. I'm not just talking about things within Las Vegas or Nevada or within, you know, my sort of regional structure. We're talking about people that are in finance and healthcare that, you know, are global, and
Right.
it offers for some really good eclectic views.
Absolutely.
You know, Pete,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you know, Pete, I think to add to that, when you think about just the different experience levels of the group that we're talking with today, right? The number of years we've been a part of HFMA. I think one of the other things that's a benefit is when you get into that volunteer leadership role, you can be sitting around a table with someone who's been a volunteer leader, an active participant for 30 years, and right next to them can be someone who's been there for 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. And one of the great things is those two perspectives and those two voices can hold equal weight if the volunteer leader who's bringing that collaborative group together allows them to. And I think that's a great skill set to learn how to manage and to use, so that you really do take advantage of all the perspectives that are available.
I would agree with that. I think that is one of the best components that when I was a volunteer, when I first started, I was early in my career, and I was given the opportunity that I didn't have necessarily in the position I was in. And so I learned from my mentors within HFMA. So I would agree with that completely. So Pete, I'm going to kind of go back a little bit. You mentioned networking, and there is a huge network across the country of peers. How do you leverage the resources, especially during these times? You know, kind of reaching out and learning from each other.
Yeah, networking, you know, again, I look at HFMA and I think a lot of people will look at an association or something that they're part of and say, hey, what am I getting out of this? For me, networking and a lot of what I do in my career through negotiations of contracts and running networks is very personal. And the network that I built over the past 30 years, it's invaluable in getting done what I need to get done. Having the ability to pick up a telephone and be able to speak to a CFO or speak to an industry leader and get their sort of candid opinion, send out an email, and know that within, 20 minutes or so, I'll get 3 or 4 different responses, speaks very highly, I think, to the network we built. And I will say that HFMA is always very funny because it's that weird dream. I'll go to a conference and there'll be that person that I worked with in the early 90s at NYU, and here's a person that I had worked with at HCA, and here's somebody over at Anthem, and all these people shouldn't be in the room at the same time, but it's kind of cool. And as Dayton had said, you'll have some folks that are going into retirement or pre-retirement or been retired, or folks that are in the middle of their career. I'm watching people sort of come through, and each one of those individuals can give sort of a different view. We're in unprecedented territory right now with regards to, telemedicine and being sort of flexible with billing and wanting to make sure we're meeting our patient needs. And I've just found that the network that I have built with a lot of assistance through HFMA has assisted me in hopefully making informed decisions.
So Andrew, would you share with us the experience of providing content and education to members at the local and regional level?
Sure. So, I'll be the first to admit that I believe that one of the most important things HFMA as an organization does is provide education. So I have advocated, especially within my own chapter, let's make sure that no matter what the circumstances are, we're providing the education to our members that helps them to organize their departments, their organizations, and move it towards doing something that's going to benefit those healthcare providers. And so we really focus on that. And one of the things that I've gotten the opportunity to do, whether that's presenting from an education perspective, doing something like this, serving as a moderator or facilitator, that's really pushed me along is that opportunity to kind of be uncomfortable and present and be able to disseminate some of that information and or put the information together from the beginning. I may not always be the person who's actually doing the presentation, but really spending time engaging with what our members want to hear, need to hear, talking to CFOs, and then being able to pass that information along.
So I'm going to add on to that just a little bit, Andrew. But what have you done as a volunteer that has pushed you most out of your comfort zone? And we're going to start with you, and I'm going to ask Pete and Dayton to add to that.
I'll be honest. I am not someone who finds anxiety in speaking in public, and yet presenting is still something that is always going to leave you with that little bit of doubt going in. And it's always uncomfortable. And so, yes, when you get up there in front of 150, 200 people and you start talking and you have the opportunity to present information that they actually want to hear, there's always a little bit of uncomfort or discomfort with doing that kind of presentation.
Yeah, and I'll go because, I'm a very shy person, very introverted. I have a hard time expressing my feelings, I guess I'd say. I'd say...
But you're a great hugger.
Thank you. I would say that for me, probably when I was on the National Advisory Council and we were talking about payer reform, that really helped give me more of sort of a macro national view and a great deal of a respect for the intelligence and knowledge of the panel and leaders to help write position papers to CMS and really trying to help shape policy. That was not in my wheelhouse, but something that I got a lot out of and definitely made me feel a little uncomfortable as I felt like I was a little out of my league, but enjoyed my experience there.
Yeah, I think I'll piggyback off of what Andrew said. I mean, certainly early on, speaking in front of any group, especially when you're one of the younger folks and you're starting your career out and you're trying to build your career and you're up in front of this, maybe it's your chapter and which can be even more nerve-wracking because you know most of them and you have to get up and present on information. Early on, I'd say that's what it was. As it progressed, I think one of the things that's challenged me most is as a CAT, we're often put in leadership positions, and some of those are at LTC frequently when we're leading sessions. And there are times when even the best intention doesn't necessarily result in conveying the information that all the folks in that room believe they were there to hear. And so pivoting on the fly as we're dealing with real-time, developments in a presentation and changing it on the fly, taking a 30-second break and saying, okay, we're going to reset and we're changing and we're going forward in this direction has been challenging, but really rewarding because then you get to see that the information you did convey did meet the objectives of the folks there.
Well, and being able to facilitate on the fly is not an easy transition or skill set, but being part of the chapter advancement team, it's essential as you progress in the 3 years, and some other people have more years under their belt just because it takes them longer to figure that out. one of the individuals on the presentation today, but we won't name names. So
I might not be where you guys are pointing if that's just I hope so.
Everybody has a different screen.
Listen, sometimes it takes an extra year to get perfect. And so I took the opportunity to latch onto that perfection year.
And Tracy, I'll actually jump off of that. I'll all seriousness aside. One of the cool things, thinking back to one of the questions you had earlier, and you had mentioned, I actually served as president twice. I think there was maybe a 7-year span between the two. I had jumped in as sort of a gap fill when there was a personal issue with one of the incoming presidents. And I'll tell you, not very often do you have the ability to go back into a position, as Dayton had said, I was much younger when I was in there sort of the first time and sort of fumbled my way through, but came back a lot more confident and kind of had a reboot or a reset of saying, hey, knowing what I know now, what would I do sort of different coming in on this year? And felt like I was more confident, more focused. I drove the message. We excelled in, numerous sort of awards and accolades. And I look back on that with a lot of work, but a lot of fondness. And having that ability to go through it sort of a second time was definitely very rewarding for me.
Yeah, and there's been several opportunities for that in other chapters. I know that other leaders have had that same, experience, and we appreciate that, just because I think that there's lots of, individuals that do, in Andrew's case, the younger, push when you're president, and maybe Andrew will have his opportunity to be president in the next 6 or 7 years too. We'll see what happens. We won't hold out, but just in case. So I know that Andrew and Pete, you guys are both certified members. So first of all, congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, and you're both fellows. So that means that they have contributed a lot of volunteer time and effort and speaking and that type of thing. So what encouraged you to get certified with HFMA?
Yeah, I'll start, and I'd like to say that Dayton and I are not only fellows, we're buddies. So, just a couple letters, Tracy, but.
Oh, dear goodness. Yeah.
For me, it's really funny. I had set off on wanting to get my CHFP many years ago. Sat on study groups, had gone at the annual conference, just had a hard time kind of getting the modules sort of lined up where I was able to kind of pass them both. And probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I set it as my personal goal. I took over certification for the Nevada chapter, and I challenged all the board members to become certified. And the way that I sort of thought about it was that, number one, I want to lead by example. Number two, healthcare is pretty competitive, and having something that helps differentiate you from another candidate, whether it's your sort of work experience, and especially when you're younger on, I just thought it was kind of cool thing to, sort of challenge myself with. So I did the first one, passed it, and then just immediately went right into the second and then passed it. And I was just ecstatic. And I had already had, all of the work behind me that kind of fast-tracked into the fellowship.
Nice.
And for me, I was, as we've already established, a little bit younger in my career when I started evaluating, healthcare looks to be the direction that my career is taking right now from my firm's perspective. And I saw an opportunity to advance my knowledge, not so much be able to publicize that knowledge or advertise, yes, I'm a CHFP, but more I wanted to understand some of the elements of the healthcare finance that I didn't quite get yet. And so I was already working pretty in depth on the financial reporting side of things. I didn't really understand some of the pieces with respect to contracting, and I certainly wasn't an expert with respect to reimbursement and some of the rev cycle topics. And so I saw that as an opportunity for me to broaden my horizon and develop that skill set that I didn't really have yet.
And unlike Andrew, I did it all just for the accolades. So
That's awesome. So Dayton, I know you've had opportunities to have a mentor and be a mentor. Could you share a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, I think whenever you've got a chance, so first, being a mentor to someone else is probably one of the more rewarding things I think you can do, as you help another person navigate all the challenges that their career and life may be bringing them. But I also think, early on, mentors to me were some of the first places that I started to gain the confidence to go stand in front of that big group and lead, and to take those additional steps. And they were really important to my development up through the chapter, and then even within my career. And it's been, I'd say, more rewarding to be the mentor now. That also means that I'm of a certain age where you qualify to be a mentor because you've gained enough experience to do it. But I think sharing that experience is truly a great thing. And I think as a mentee, as folks who might be in that category now, certainly take that mentor relationship seriously, but also understand the mentor's advice is one perspective, and it may be beneficial to check out some other perspectives, because the relationship between a mentor and a mentee, I think, is really important. And if there's not a good personality fit there, or not a really easy match, you might not end up getting all you need out of that relationship. So don't be scared to test some waters if you don't feel like you're getting exactly what you need.
So this question will be for the group, but let's start with Andrew. What has been your favorite event or experience that you would like to share with the group today?
Now you're testing my skill set here. I will tell you, I had some hiccups and I wasn't able to make my very first LTC. So my first LTC experience is probably the one that I remember the most. And it was just a great time getting to know the people within our chapter, learning personalities, spending time outside of actually being at a chapter meeting. Because I'll tell you, 90% of the time that we spend together is when we're at a meeting and we're physically putting on that meeting. So we're all trying to do different things. We're not getting to spend, time together, learning, yes, being educated, but we're just spending time together. And so that first LTC was probably one of my favorite experiences.
Awesome.
Pete probably can't remember that far back.
Yeah, I'd say probably one of my favorite experiences is probably this video interview, because you gave me a reason to actually shower and brush my hair. But aside from that, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the CAT team obviously is probably one of my favorite experiences. It really gave the ability to take a lot of what I'd learned in HFMA and throughout my career and kind of bring it all together. As was mentioned sort of earlier, we get to go in, and it's not always on a negative, but go in and have a conversation with a chapter and, go through good things that they're doing and just kind of help sort of pressure test strategic plans and help folks get focused on, getting the most out of it. I mean, this is a volunteer organization, and I'm always very mindful and very respectful of people's time. And it means a lot for an organization for folks to want to give up so much of their own unpaid time and their family time to be able to focus on something that's meaningful to them.
Yeah, I'd say for me, I think going up through the leadership, different positions, at the time that I was either in that position or had just come out of that position, that one was my favorite. And looking back, I'd say at this point, I think being a CAT is probably the one I've enjoyed the most of all collectively. I think I've been going to LTC since 2006, and I missed a couple in the middle there, but have been pretty consistent since then. And there's a lot of experiences from LTC that you'll never forget. And there's a lot of them that you do forget until someone brings it up when they see you at an LTC and say, "Oh, hey, remember in San Antonio when?" Or, that one time we were in San Diego when, and oh my goodness, I forgot all about that. And you think about all the collective experiences that have come together to really kind of form that overall integration that you've had into the association. And I think it all makes for one fantastic story that you get to keep writing as you go.
I would agree. I've been fortunate to be on both sides, so it has definitely been a journey. What advice would you all give to new members of HFMA to get the most out of their membership?
Just get involved. I think the starting point is do something. And that's something that we often talk about with respect to a lot of things in life. But just doing something, just finding one way to plug in will allow you to take the next step, which may be serving on a committee, which will allow you the next step to leading that committee. And then maybe you end up going through the ranks, and maybe you do get the opportunity to do all these other national level things. Even if you don't, some of the best relationships that I and many of my colleagues have are because of HFMA, and you can't have that unless you just get started.
Yeah, I'd agree with Andrew. I'd say be patient. There's a lot to this organization from the local, regional, and from the national levels, and I think from an outsider it can be a bit daunting. But find a mentor and use it as an ability to be able to escalate your career if that's what you're looking to do. I think networking is a key part. I think you get to hone leadership skills that you normally may not be in a leadership position, but you could have the ability of leading a committee, or sitting on a board, and making those connections that for me has lasted many years, and it's very exciting to see people continue to grow and thrive.
Yeah, and I'd piggyback off of that. I think there's an old saying. I don't know who said it, and so I'm probably going to upset somebody by not giving them credit, but it's along the lines of those who can do. And so, I think get involved early, and you'll be surprised what you can do, because a lot of the things you may not think you have the confidence to pull off, or you may not think you have the knowledge to do. You'll be surprised how much you really can do by just getting involved, and how much you'll learn.
And I truly do think that it does help develop the career path if you need the added skill set or development that you guys discussed earlier. So I appreciate that. One last question to kind of conclude for today is, can you guys share one thought that being affiliated with HFMA in the current environment that we're in today has been beneficial? And we'll go ahead and start with Pete.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote, Tracy. I'm not sure if it's Confucius or who said it, but some people dance in the rain and others just get wet. That saying just keeps coming back to me and just giving me the strength to move in these trying times. I think I've become extremely proficient at video conferencing. It's extremely important. On 5, 6, 7 of these a day, learning how to be very nimble. Both from communication and from where I'm burning my calories. Because once this pandemic is over, CMS timelines and requirements and benefit designs, none of those are going to wait. So we need to make sure, for my job, that we're continuing to, keep everybody very motivated, keep everybody, very focused on kind of what's being done. And, I like the information that HFMA has been sending to me, because it's in sort of bite-sized morsels. I can see something and say, hey, this is interesting, let me drill a little bit deeper, as opposed to, having to dig through, a 7-page position paper. But there's a lot of information and a lot of folks out there doing some great work, and, being very focused on healthcare. This is our time.
Well, I think, it certainly made Andrew more attractive. There's no doubt about that. I can't remember who said it before, but I think, the networks that we develop because of our relationship within HFMA have made something like this just so important to be able to tap into, because certainly we have a sense of what might be going on in our local environment. But to be able to bounce that off of what other folks are seeing and what other decisions are being made and how they're being made is just so important. And using that network to really tap into those resources is, I think you just can't underestimate the value.
And I'll piggyback off of that a little bit. I truly do believe that the relationships that we've developed, they may be clients already, but the relationships that we've developed through HFMA avail us to more access than just the traditional, from a business partner perspective, the client-business partner relationship. We can reach out and have conversations with our clients, who are really our friends, about things that are more than just what's going on in business. Like, help me understand the underlying issues that your organization is dealing with. And there's a trust level there that goes far beyond just speaking with someone from a business perspective. And then another thing that I think is really important, and obviously as you've watched this webinar, you know I haven't learned yet, but one thing that I believe we're going to learn a new skill in the sense of utilizing Zoom and these other online-based webinar presentations. We're going to be forced into a new dynamic of presentation. It's not one of those things where you can just write a script and read it. Your face is now on the screen and people are now looking straight at you. So I really think it's important for everyone to be able to transition and learn this new skill. And obviously now HFMA is giving many of us that opportunity to practice.
Well, we really appreciate that you did your hair today, Andrew, because that was a key component. So
it takes a lot. Maybe not as much as Pete's, but it takes a lot.
And it's no longer called a webinar, it's called a virtual conference because there's no slides and death by stream. So, you know, we are now trying to move into the next, you know, new experience. I don't know if it's digital or what we're going to call it, but we are trying to learn as fast as we can. So,
Andrew, you are so 2011. I cannot believe that.
I can't thank each of you enough for taking the time today to make this recording, and we will be delivering this on April 27th. As you guys are going to be doing live Q&A while everybody listens to this recording. So, and there is. Oh,
They
we
have
didn't
been
get to
very
see him.
patient sitting here.
I get to see him. Oh, got to go down further. There we go. Hello.
That's Missy and Oreo.
Right.
Been very patient.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye, guys.
Peace.
Well, hello there, Pete. How are you?
Hello, hello. Doing good.
Yeah, that was awesome. Now we'll see what sections we're in today. Oh, Andrew, can you figure it out, buddy? There you are.
There we go.
And now we're coming to you live today, and we have quite a few questions in our Q&A and chat pod. So we'll get started and answering some of these questions. I do have one for all of you, though. When we were recording, what was the best part of the whole experience for you guys?
I'll start off. I'd have to say the fact that none of the background for Dayton has moved, not only during the first taping, but today, everything is exactly where it was. It's crazy.
Maybe it's
because we take stay at home very seriously, Pete. We don't move anything.
Yeah, that's great.
I will say my background has also not changed, and I've received multiple comments via text and the chat about the fact that I have a very bland wall background. Please take that up with my managing partner, Carly Williams, who chose the background. No, I'm just kidding. No, it was actually quite a bit of fun to sit down with everyone and make that recording. And the other thing I will comment on right now, just briefly before we get started, is one question insinuated that they wanted us to stop Pete from making certain jokes.
Yes.
Well, I can't stop Pete from making dad jokes. That is Pete's thing, and he's the king of it. So
that is what Pete
unfortunately,
is about,
we really
right?
cannot stop you. Sorry.
Exactly. Well, I thank you guys for coming on again today. You know, in this environment, things change a lot, and my background did change because I needed to be connected to my ether cord, which was in my office downstairs that was flooded in January right before the Western Symposium, as some of you know that were on the line today that were at the Western Symposium. So I had to makeshift an office down in my basement to have my cords so I didn't have to drill a hole in my floor and cause other things to happen. So my background has changed. But we did have some questions come in. So one of them is, how do you as a chapter leader see leading in the new environment, both for the member and in the volunteer engagement moving forward?
I think there's going to be a set of challenges that volunteer leaders haven't experienced yet. And I think the engagement piece of it's going to be a big challenge, and finding ways to connect. I think the association, having traditionally been built off of education and networking, was very much about those personal interactions and those relationships you had. And when you can't have those in the same environment, I think finding, some way to connect everybody is going to be a challenge. And certainly video conferencing is a big help with that. And I think there's also going to be other ways that we're going to have to get creative to find a way to make those personal relationships continue to expand, because that is one of the biggest pieces I think that the association brings to not just members, but all the volunteers.
Yeah, and along those lines, are actually kind of a little bit different path. I mean, I think that one of the things we're going to have to be prepared for is exactly what we've been talking about, which is this Zoom virtual conference. I don't want to speak for Tracy and the team that spent countless hours putting all of this together, but at the same time, this was a different set of skills that were required to put on and host and facilitate an online virtual conference, if I get the terminology correct this time. So
yes, at least you were listening. I really appreciate that. So Pete, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say, and also as a little bit of a plug for my upcoming presentation later today. On the Zoom meetings, I get to carry my awards around with me.
Oh, dear goodness.
For HFMA, so.
Who allowed him to bring props
And you've
today?
got a few of those in your office too, I imagine.
There's a whole shelf dedicated to HFMA awards and paraphernalia.
Yes.
Yeah, Tracy, all kidding aside, I'd say everything that everybody said. I mean, we're becoming more nimble, able to share more information. I think one of the things is I've never really worked from home before that I've had a challenge, at least sort of the first week or so, is the work-life balance. It's easy to wake up at 5 a.m. and you start checking emails and you're cutting things down at 7, 8 o'clock at night. So finding kind of that balance between the family and, this is all live. So I've got Amazon delivering a spice rack today so I can organize my pantry. I've got 2 dogs, 2 kids running around. And it's just funny being in this sort of new environment, both with work and the volunteer work, to see how folks are staying very integrated with, both work and as was said earlier, kind of checking in on people and keeping that networking component going.
Yeah, and Andrew, I'm going to play off of your skill set for a virtual conference. It is completely different, and for you guys too. Delivering at LTC, and I'm going to comment on Dayton's comment in the video where I think you said something about pivoting on the fly. It's easy to do that when you're in person and you can see people. And yes, that's an awesome view, Kate. So when you're pivoting on the fly in person, you can read people in your audience and you can adjust accordingly. Today, the video happened to play right for this session. Earlier today, if you guys weren't on, we did have to go to Plan B and do live from the beginning of the presentation. So thankfully, the 34 or 35 minutes that we spent the other day together over video worked out today. But, there are things like that happen. So I appreciate you kind of calling that out. How do you, as chapter leaders, see leading the new environment, both, I just read you guys that one, I'm sorry. I need to go to how do you see future meetings or events, especially more timely in like fall and winter and maybe even spring? Do you see them ramping up? What are your thoughts on how the chapters kind of are looking at managing some of the events that are scheduled?
Yeah, I'll start on this, Tracy. I think we're going to need to be careful. I think each state is having a different type of re-entry strategies in place. I know that there's a lot of folks looking at contracts with force majeure and being a little careful about sort of committing to, putting a lot of money and sort of resources down. Some of the things that we've been looking at are no-show events, doing, as we had said, sort of more virtual, and that changes the whole structure. It changes things from, not having food to how you're getting speakers to transportation. I just see things kind of moving at a little bit more of a cautious, slower pace, but also being sort of focused on making sure that the content, as Andrew had said in his video, one of the big things is education, and we need to make sure that we're being very creative in how we're sharing appropriate content.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the chapters, well, at least the northern chapters, there's a certain part of the year where it's just a no-fly zone for educational events because you're not sure whether the weather is going to cooperate enough to pull it off. And I think going through these video conferencing, virtual educational experiences will give those chapters an outlet to try education in a whole different way than they may have believed possible before. And so those conferences in January or February in the winter, or during tornado season in the South, they may take a different spin when you're not as worried about, what the weather is going to do, and you can still provide content. But I also think it gives the opportunity for more real-time content. So, if a regulation comes out or if a change in policy comes out, you can address that quicker because you can get on, a Zoom or a different virtual experience and provide that information immediately.
Thank you. So I do have to give the shout out to Pete. You go, Pete. We love you in Northeast Ohio. So whoop, whoop. There you go, Pete. So, and Andrew, you had one earlier about your background that you already called yourself out on. So
Well, Bill has already said it again now that I've gone live. So thanks, Bill.
oh, nice. Okay, so
You
here's
look like you're in a
certification.
hostage situation, Andrew. You really do.
Hold up a newspaper so we know it's really today.
Yeah.
Newspaper, Pete? Really?
Everything's
Keep
online.
preaching.
Okay, so what certification do you think is most valuable for someone's career? CRCR, accounting and finance, or what has been most beneficial to your, or most valuable to your career?
Well, I think that the whole point of having multiple certifications is the idea that for different individuals with different skill sets in different areas, we have something that allows them to demonstrate their sophistication or their understanding of that particular area. So it really all depends on what you do. Like I said, I have the CHFP. I took it at a time when I was really more focused on my finance and accounting background, and I wanted to understand a little bit more about the other areas that I didn't already, have a high level knowledge of. And so I think that was an opportunity for me to grow that skill set. But if you're a revenue cycle person, or if you're focused on another particular area, there's always an opportunity to start in that particular area and then move forward.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a little off topic, Tracy, because I'm looking at my video and a little bit of a deep cut. I'm kind of looking like Phil Collins in No Jacket Required.
Well, thank you for that.
Like I said, we can't stop it, guys. We can't.
Do we get to vote when Pete gets to participate again?
Yes, we will definitely, we'll be taking that into consideration for the future LTCs in the next few months. So if Pete's not on the screen, you'll know why.
I got that nice orange hue.
It's because you have all that sun behind you that some of us are very jealous
It's
about.
true.
So,
it's beautiful here.
So what about the networking portion of our conferences, which are essential to the sponsors? With these new times, what can we offer our sponsors? And I know we're going to answer this question a little bit later in the next session with the panel with the REs. So if you guys want to give just a brief comment.
Yeah, I'd say like Jenna did with the voice of God in the beginning of these presentations, giving specific shout outs, making sure that we're being a little bit more creative. And the cool part, I think, if I was looking at through the lens of a sponsor, there's a lot more sort of connectivity right now. So you've got sort of a captive audience. You got a lot of people that aren't getting out and about. So I think it's a great way to get that segment of who they're trying to reach out and try to get that message through.
Okay, anybody else? And I know that's a question for our panel. We're having a panel with some REs at the 2:30 session, and we are going to cover some of these. So if I didn't ask your question during this time, know that it could be on the docket for the next session. One of the questions here, though, is about volunteer commitment and the time commitment being a concern with all the changes in the environment and, you know, other things that they may have pulling them in another direction. So could you give us your thoughts on that?
I think it's a real issue. I think it's one of those ways where, as we continue to see, you know, especially providers working within their facilities, they don't have a lot of extra time right now, and they're not being given, in some cases, a lot of extra time to work with a trade organization like ours. But I would encourage you just to find little ways for people to get involved. I mean, it's always been the same thing. We always start our involvement with little steps. And so, you know, maybe it's utilizing some volunteer software to put tasks out that say, here are the tasks that we need help with, and encouraging some of the folks who are newer to the organization or newer to our chapter, or who are on our committees but aren't engaged at a high level right now, say, hey, these are the things we need help with. Can you assist? They're not going to take much time, or this one's going to take an hour or two. But just little steps to help get people engaged.
Yeah, and I would say, as Dayton talked about in the video, mentorship, I think it's a great opportunity for this, especially for some of the senior members, to start outreaching, definitely connect with new members coming on board, make sure there's right check-ins with committee leaders and folks sort of understand, you know, what's being asked of them, but understand that, you know, as Andrew had said, you know, this is it's a real issue, I think, with everybody sort of, like I said, balancing homework and sort of personal life balance right now.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that a little bit, because just putting this together today, the virtual conference, there were a lot of things that we learned. And even from the chapter advancement team, you know, there were different asks that you guys had compared to what we would normally do for LTC Live in Austin. So, you know, there's a lot of things that will be coming out in our checklist or our playbook from these sessions, that there might be more opportunity to engage with others that have a skill set that we don't currently have in, you know, the chapter setting. So I think that there's opportunity, but I do think that the time commitment, you know, needs to be evaluated, especially currently in this environment, which does tee up the next question is, you know, how do we, and this actually is a question that is going to be talked about in the next session. It's about chapter success plans, but how will we continue our chapter success plans for leadership without being able to be in the groups? And how do you continue the plan, or how would you recommend continuing the plan? Oh dear goodness.
So I think as Pete tries to, where's my Bruins thing? This way. There we go. Pete. Okay.
So Knights go.
You know, I think with the chapter success plans, I think the key for the next chapter year is going to be keeping them fluid and adaptable. Yeah. Because I think where we are, you know, if we look back 3 months ago, we would not have predicted that we would be here today. 3 months from now, we're going to be in a different spot again than we're able to predict today. A year from now, when we're looking at that chapter success plan for the year after this, it's going to be a set of conditions that we've got very little control over and not a lot of ability to influence in any significant way. So I think when you come up with your plan, keep it adaptable and take off reasonable size bites. But I think that gets back to, you know, how do you balance all the different challenges? You know, I think micro volunteering is going to become more and more important. And I think the chapter success plans, I think keeping those achievements realistic but adaptable is going to need to be something that's taken into consideration so that you can change course and still feel like you hit the mark on the success plan, because it's not necessarily pass or fail. I think it's an effort to make the chapter better all the time.
All right. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, no, I agree with Dayton. I mean, we're past the hey, PowerPoint's not working, have an overhead projector and a grease pencil ready. What we're sort of doing now and what we're going to be doing 6 months from now are going to be very different. And I think this is really going to change the way that, look at this. It's the first annual virtual LTC, all the fun with none of the exposure, right? Who knows what this will look like sort of next year. So excited to see this going without a hitch. I hope I didn't jinx us, Tracy. But
yeah, I was going to say, we did go off the rails just a little bit, but we didn't fall completely off. So the train is still moving forward. So we're A-okay. But I will tell you, I don't know that this virtual thing is going to become annual. I just want to throw that out there. We plan on going back live. I'm really praying for 2021 to be in Orlando. There was a reason that Brianna put that in her, Brianna put that in her Wheel of Fortune earlier today. So I'm going to read some of the questions because I don't want you to think that we didn't see them, because they will be answered on the panel discussion today. One is about how do you see charging for a virtual conference? The REs have talked through this a little bit, and there are a few of them that are experiencing that they're going to take some of their bigger events virtually, and they've talked to, do you charge or do you not charge? So we'll answer that in the next session. And then, has anybody given any thought on how you might charge folks to attend a virtual spring conference? So that kind of goes hand in hand with those. If we didn't answer a question today live, we will be doing a video, either video Q&A, or we'll try and answer some of them at the end of the session that we're beginning at 2:30. So any closing comments from you guys today?
Just thanks for having the opportunity to having us share our thoughts, and appreciate all of the texts and comments that I've been getting throughout this live event. So,
yeah, I just want to say thanks to the chapter relations team for making this work, because I just don't know how they were able to prepare a meeting that gets canceled, reschedule a meeting that then gets canceled, and then still pull this off all in the midst at one time. So, Tracy, your entire team is incredible. Y'all have done a lion's share of work. I do not know how you've done it, so congratulations and thank you.
Well, we're looking forward to April 28th. I'm so joking.
Well, I think you set the bar pretty high when it comes to the chapters and the regions trying to figure out how to duplicate an effort like this. But you certainly do have a playbook you can share now, and hopefully that they can bring into their own environment and make work in that way. And I also think it makes a big difference, all kidding aside, as much as I like to give Pete and Andrew a hard time, it makes a difference when there's already a pretty good relationship built with the people that you're doing this with, because you can still read off each other even when you can't be in the same room, and you can work together in a pretty good way. So, I think that makes a big difference. So thank you guys for making this as easy as it was. So
Pete and Andrew didn't think you were easy to work with, but I wasn't going to say that until you just made that comment. So thank you. Well, I want to thank each of you. Yes, it has been, we started out, we thought we were nailing it and we were going to make it happen. And then, we had to redesign and go back to the playbook. And we've actually been back to the playbook 4 or 5 times now, just because it's like, oh, these are the questions that are being asked now. We need to revise everything we're doing in the afternoon. So you guys have been very flexible, and here's your deck. Oh, I was just kidding. You don't have one anymore. So thank you for being, flexible and kind of just rolling with the punches, and, facilitation on the fly has been much appreciated. So, in talking about the voice of God, Jenna, would you like to do the closing remarks for us?
Nope, she's all set. She's good.
She speaks volumes without saying a word.
Oh, dear goodness.
She says it all when she says nothing at all.
Jenna? All right. Well, you know what?
Well,
thank you, everyone.
We can just thank the
through.
sponsors, and we can thank the entire chapter relations team for all that they did. And we'll be back in what, 20 minutes?
Yes. So thank you, Dayton, for teeing that up. That here, and we do thank our sponsors and really appreciate everybody's time. We will log back in at 2:30 and hope to see you there. The panel will be a few REs from this current year and then 3 incoming REs along with Dayton moderating, and you'll get to see your own Pete and Andrew to start out the day. So we'll see you back here at 2:30. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.